Blasphemous is a sonata in stained glass, wrapped in layers of bloody thorns. It presents a world built on the back of a religion where Christ did not die for our sins, but lived because of them. We'll never know why he was put on the cross. All he leaves us with is the thought that he deserved it. I've never seen a world like this before, and it spoke to me. It's a manifestation of a perspective I don't share, but would have to be willfully blind not to appreciate. After all, sin is something we made up, but its effects still haunt and twist our insides, no matter how much a demand for justice exists only in our own heads. The world of Blasphemous, however, takes the spiritual agony of sin and metabolizes it into the life of these characters. Through that, we get a unique space to, if nothing else, ruminate, with folks suffering physical manifestations of the internal hurt that comes from living as an imperfect person in a kingdom of misery. Well, this may just be the funniest thing I've ever written. I hate to get so philosophical at the outset, or honestly at all, but this thing landed in a particular place for me, and so to really talk about it, I gotta excavate deep. I'll just try to use a pickaxe made of, what is my brand of humor? Sad clown? Let's anchor ourselves a little bit. Released in 2019, Blasphemous is a 2D search action game that's pulling from a lot of inspirations, but its heaviest influence is probably Dark Souls. Not just in world design, but in storytelling and aesthetic, as this place is painted with beautifully grotesque pixel graphics atop a rich mountain of world building and lore. The desire to incorporate hack-and-slash combat a la Devil May Cry was also a major impetus behind the gameplay, and being honest, that combo sounds extremely my shit. Aside from the Dark Souls part. I'll finally play those games when they invent a surgery to give me more patience. Sin and penance are huge themes in Blasphemous, and one of the reasons the approach here feels so unique and substantial is because of where the piece was born. Developers over at the Game Kitchen pulled heavily from their Spanish culture and even pretty extensively from the art of their own hometown in Seville. I think it's kind of hard to conceptualize what Christianity looks like over there, because ingrained as it is in American culture, it is, ultimately, but another side dish to serve the whims of consumerism. As a result, a lot of the brutality and very visceral aspects of the religion get smoothed over to make it a more palatable narrative in my country. But in a place where Catholicism is older, different, and molecularly grafted to your understanding of the world around you, well, you might just make Blasphemous. Spanish Catholicism runs deep into the art and architecture of a country that has been around so much longer than the mercantile nightmare of America. And, as I understand it, the bones of that Catholicism are seeped in pain and tragedy. The Passion of Jesus Christ was, after all, fucking brutal. And in a culture that formed before we knew what germs were, there was no reason not to build outward from a few essential truths. Life hurts, we're all sinners, and the best of us suffered pain we cannot even fathom for a love we don't deserve. This doesn't even necessarily have to come with belief. To quote an interview with some of the devs, quote, "Really, all these works and traditions are not lived here as something merely religious, but it is something cultural and traditional and a part of our DNA," end quote. Honestly, though the images may be unique in particular, the themes resonate universally. This is about all the primer I can give you without sinking our teeth into the game itself. So, to really understand why this piece is so effective at stirring cauldrons of feeling in so many readers, we best start our pilgrimage and subject ourselves to a grueling act of penance. What are we penitent over? Looking at the guy, I'm gonna say he coveted his neighbor's PlayStation. Kinda low on the list of sins, but hey, God doesn't discriminate. He hates all of us. We get a short intro cutscene to set the mood before anything else. A woman in the throes of guilt pounds a stone effigy against her chest, begging for divine punishment to grant her pain. Her prayers are answered, and from the effigy grows a blade that pierces the woman's heart. As she bleeds, a heavenly glow hardens her flesh and drops flower petals by the lady now always and forever kneeling. The mea culpa remains there until we claim it from her breast and make her shame our own. We then get some backstory to prep us for the world ahead. Inexplicably, psychic pains began to supernaturally manifest in the poor people of Cavastodia. Why'd they spell it like that? Those manifestations were sometimes a blessing, though they seemed to lean more towards corruptive punishment. This cosmic force whose will exceeds our meager understanding was called the Miracle. With that, we fade into an enormous statue of, presumably, one such victim of the miracle. An important one at that, given he's here and on the handle of our sword. He's apparently rooted in the culture of Custodia, this man whose veins were wrapped around the upright pole he's now a part of. This statue stands above a sea of massacred bodies, a brotherhood of corpses who all wear the same stupid hat. We're one such corpse, until the miracle grants us new life upon the hitting of left bumper. And so the penitent one reaches for the mea culpa, rising for a second chance at his mission of worldly redemption. We get a screen to acquaint ourselves with the basics of the movement before we're introduced to a preview. These are the Dark Souls bonfires of the game, where you save your progress and refill your health on healing flasks. In the next room, however, before we can make our way to the outside, we're beset by the Warden of the Silent Sorrow. This parody of our brethren was apparently put here to protect the remains of this silent fraternity, and he's doing a pretty fucking good job because I cannot kill him and die to touch damage. Upon my demise, I get a pop-up tutorial letting me know that dash I used earlier can avoid attacks and slide through enemies unharmed. And you know, I guess you're right, I could have done that. Using the dash technique, I'm able to stay alive long enough to whittle down the Warden's health. Soon, the kiss of death frees this flesh from the miracle's puppeteering. After it does, the penitent one engages in some strange ritual. He allows the Warden's blood to fill his helmet, and it, like tears, streams down the emotionless edifice that adorns this metal capirote. I hope I'm saying these words right. A locked door pushes me to the Brotherhood's front steps in the Holy Line. But here's Deogracias, whose penance is to bear witness and give narration to the acts of the Grievous Miracle. The will of the Grievous Miracle must really enjoy stories, because it's producing a lot of things conducive to an Act 1. And a conception of God where he enjoys watching our pain for entertainment is my thing. Give it back. In a close-up, Deogracias tells us what we seek is called the Cradle of Affliction and sits in the Mother of the Churches. The place is magically sealed shut and requires undergoing 3 humiliations, because the door has a sense of humor. Finally, Deogracias gives us a thorn to place in the hilt of the mea culpa, and says once it has grown with our guilt and pricks our very flesh, then we will be fully at the mercy of the miracle. Mercy Line is essentially more tutorial screens after meeting with Deogracias. Firstly, we're introduced to the parry technique and prayer spells. I mention these because I know how to do them. There's this last thing you do where you can dash into the air after hitting an enemy, but after enough times of getting bitch slapped trying to do it, I resign myself to believing that move just wasn't for me. The next pre-do is before our first town, Albero. Here we meet the Kissers of Wounds, a band of healers with plenty of customers in a place this fucked. Downstairs is also a shrine to the mea culpa, and resting at it increases the sword's power and allows us to purchase upgrades. I'm poor though, so we'll return here later. Past Albero is the wasteland of the buried churches, and here I can finally go into how this gameplay feels now that we're let loose on these enemies. Honestly, though the combat was apparently influenced by the hack and slash of Devil May Cry, it feels like it leans way heavier in the Dark Souls direction than that of DMC. Though I'm bad at DMC, and am inferring on what Souls combat feels like, so what I'm saying is don't listen to me. Combos don't flow outside of pre-packaged animations, meaning you're always locked into the same 3-hit sword slash. And the real kicker for me is that the dash can't be woven into the combat flow. You can't be in the middle of a combo, dash, and then jump right back into the attacks. You gotta first turn around and then go into a weighty swing. There's more animations and inputs involved in doing stuff DMC keeps simple to keep a sustained button dance. This whole setup just feels slower, weightier, and meant to be played much more intentionally, which is why I liken it more to Souls. That did not jive with me at first. We'll investigate further once we flesh this out a bit more, but at the start, I was very bad at this game. I was expecting the combat to have more momentum behind it, I guess, be more movement focused. But no, thus far, the game wants you to plant your feet before you dodge, parry, or enter into a combo that keeps those feet planted. The penitent one must have done something real shitty in his past life, because through my grievous will, he suffered. A lot. As we enter the Mercy Dreams, a figure watches our onward march. He promises his sister, who isn't really there, that he is ready to put a stop to our quest to exterminate all that is holy in the Mother of Mothers. There's a statue in the Mercy Dreams that we can kneel at to rid us of guilt. Now, the game will often explain what something does in the context of the lore, but not what it means in a gameplay sense. I didn't know I had guilt, or could be rid of it so easily. Now that you mention it, what does guilt do to me? In the real world, it leads me to start drinking again, but I have no idea what it does in the world of Blasphemous. And until they tell me, neither will you. There's some rooms with new enemies between you and the bottom of this place, and as I got my ass kicked enough times and continued to die, I noticed the myriad of shortcuts I was opening up for easy traversal, and I prayed to my own god that this design would continue on a broad scale. He never listens, but I'm hoping the devs did that anyway. The Merchant Candelaria is down here, and her tender is tears. Luckily, I cry a lot. Also, at the very base of this buried church is Viridiana, a beautiful woman entrusted to help us at particular moments in our quest, but only if we so choose. With no reason not to accept the pretty lady's help, I allow her to accompany me in the challenge ahead. That turns out to be this tree doing a pose like he's in a Michelangelo painting. What a dramatic bitch. I mean, how uncomfortable was it to lay on that statue? This is Ten Piedad, pummeler of my ass. This is our first boss, and, resultingly, the first marathon test of combat that I did not score too great on. Maybe in 2D games, I'm used to characters with this mobility having it carry over into the combat. Not to say it doesn't, but the thing kneecapping me the most was my uselessness once I leave the ground. You can't dodge or parry or even really combo, so my instinctive desire to use that movement to my advantage was actually just exposing me to lethal routes. I got a little better at it, though. Tenpaidad's attacks don't come in a sequence, so there is a level of reactability to the fight. I dodged the most readable attacks and used my jump more than my parry, unwilling to let go of that carnal need to make every game centered around movement. And that's the closest I'll come on here to diagnosing myself. There's not a name for my condition, unless you consider nihilism a thought crime. I definitely wouldn't have won without the help of Viridiana, though. I still managed to die plenty while she charged up her healing spell, but once it kicked in, she gave me the second win I needed to tank more of Tenpaidad's attacks. I feel like I didn't learn as much as I could have because of that crutch, though, so I think I'll turn her down next time. Tenpaidad was guarding the mummified form of some dead holy man, and kneeling before that withered husk brings us to a ruinous dream. Corpses pile up like frozen waves of a ceaseless stone ocean, and the only living thing here appears to be this miraculous head. It claims to be the representation of that body outside, and that by humbling ourselves before him, we gain custodianship of one of the three sorrows of the one in penance. I know, that's a lot of words. Just bear with me for a sec. The penitent one is given the wound of attrition before returning to the physical dream, now one humiliation closer to the grand church at the center of the world. Dio Gracias is outside, and says what I just said, but in a cooler language because I changed it to Spanish. I figure now might be a good time to make note of the game's story and how it's delivered. If you couldn't tell already, you're just kind of dropped into this world without any justification or explicit texture to anything that's going on. As I understand it, that too is a very Dark Souls thing. There's a very rich lore and narrative behind what's happening. It's just delivered through, item descriptions. I'm fine with that to a certain extent. I've advocated before how powerful elements of a story can be if they don't get laid out to you beyond a surface level. And having that explanation there in optional text is a decent way of having your cake and eating it too in that respect. My problem is, there are very basic elements of this story that I think would make it more powerful if they got delivered a little more traditionally. For example, having item descriptions that give tragic vignettes flesh out the world and are rich and engaging. And we never get to know anything about the penitent when inside the game itself. But, there's a main antagonist. His role in the context of the story makes him an incredibly interesting figure, but I'm never really told anything about that. Not even the most basic building blocks of who he is can even start to be revealed to me, because for them to have meaning, I require an understanding of this world that is also not told to me. And that's just one very basic element of narrative that I feel like I'm missing out on. Another crushing example, we're told the name of the MacGuffin, but not what it does or why we're after it. I understand why there is conflict in the first place. I feel like if that was delivered to me at the start, I'd be way more emotionally invested. I don't care if it comes in a lore description you can get later. One might completely miss those, or, in my case, read them sparingly. And look, there's a reason certain elements of a narrative get dropped at the fucking beginning. A beautiful thing about writing is that you have total control over when information gets revealed to the reader. So if you're good, you make it when it's most dramatic, or at least serves the narrative. I think, anyway. This gets done to a certain extent here, and ultimately, I guess it is just up to preference how you like this stuff told to you. There's an argument for this approach being way more emotionally invigorating, and until my feelings have any objective value over yours, we're just stuck liking what we like. I, however, am going to try to deliver the information in a way that's most dramatic for the sake of my video. Look, it's either that or I start making shit up about how Eric the Penitent One read The God Delusion in middle school, but found religion after his best friend got hit by a car. I have to fill time. The area we get funneled into after the boss fight is the Desecrated Cistern, which connects back to Albero. I also get introduced to a few other victims of the miracle who offer to help us on our quest as penance of their own. From the cistern, we arrive at the Mountains of the Endless Dusk, a place that sits above the hollow halls of Hondo. These two areas in particular really elucidated the fact I do not know how to play this game. I'm so bad at parrying. In Hondo, there are a few statues holding great chains that, when broken, allow this big jar thing at the center of the place to fall once a bell has been rung. I like to believe that inside that jar is the cremated remains of a really fat person. Anyways, once the jar falls, it busts open the way to grievous ascends. And if you thought I was bad at this before, here's me being dropped in a room with enemies you're encouraged to parry. I'm willing to grant this is a me thing on account of how well these enemies have been animated to telegraph their attacks. I think I would just need a couple more frames to really be comfortable, because right now I'm getting excommunicated from the Church of Life quite often. Doesn't it suck when you can do something in video games, but not in real life? There is a complaint I have that goes beyond my lack of ability, though. I get a punishment for dying being that you have to redo a bunch of challenges. That's fine, it helps me get better at the game. But quite a lot of those challenges involve mostly waiting. And to be honest, at a certain point, I know how to parry these enemies. It just takes forever. And on the movement front, there's this hazardous miasma that really hurts if you let it tickle your lungs. Full disclosure, there's an upgrade down here past a platforming challenge that makes you immune to the gas. But I was getting my ass kicked and had to be very conservative with my exploration. In an awful self-inflicted cycle, that meant my exploration was then made much more difficult. And when it wasn't hard, again, I understand how to not get hit by those noxious clouds. I just have to wait on them. We meet Viridiana once more, and she's now more aged and withered, an apparent cost of our partnership. She assures us she's happy to foot the bill should we require her assistance ahead, but now I feel bad, so I'm not gonna. She stands before the Tres Angustias, 3 upset sisters who guard the next wound. Had a much easier time with these ladies than with the pissed off tree. This boss is much more movement focused, testing your ability to dodge these telegraphing laser spears. The arena ascends as you fight them, giving you another movement challenge on top of the sisters' attacks. I don't know, I think I'm just much better at using the movement to my advantage than a more straight test of combat. I enjoyed fighting these gals, and in way less time and subsequent pummelings than it took to kill the other guy. Humbling ourselves before the next dried corpse once again returns us to the dream of a wasteland, where another floating head spits the holy wound of contrition at us, and we return to the world of form another third closer to the mother of mothers. An elevator returns us to the desecrated cistern, and from there I return to the wasteland of the buried churches. It's here I can start to climb further, as the sunken remains of this holy temple exit to a forest painted with brushstrokes of snow. This is where the olive trees wither, and it sits at the base of a mountain so tall it pierces the heavens like a blade of cold. Approaching the mountain gets us to the graveyard of the peaks, and a subsequent shortcut down to Albero. I take the time to swing by the Mea Culpa shrine in the basement, because it's only here you can purchase upgrades for your sword. However, these aren't really expanding the combat or the moveset as much as I'd like. There are different rosary beads, and even these hearts you can equip to the Mea Culpa that I think make a decent effect on the gameplay. But the blade itself doesn't really get many extra moves, and even the ones you are offered don't make a ton of difference. You get an extra sword swipe at the end of your 3-hit combo. But that can't be then comboed into anything else. It's just an extra swing. Not a whole lot of potential for expressing any skill when the toolset is so stiff and limited. Overlooking that vast expanse of frostbitten tombstones is the convent of Our Lady of the Charred Visage. I didn't really like this place. A lot of these stage hazards and enemies build their challenge around waiting. Wait for these lava buckets to turn over, or wait for this enemy to appear so you can hit them one time and then start the cycle over again. And sure, there's short bursts of waiting, but when you die as often as I do to like one particular obstacle, it adds up having to run through the hallway where I have to stop moving every couple of seconds. The occasional kneecapping of the pace is my biggest issue with Blasphemous thus far. There was a slight curveball through here though. I don't usually experiment too much with the rosary beads I keep equipped because there are a few that just spoke to me and I never deviated from them. But I was curious what status effect this immaculate bead would offer me because it looked like it did nothing. However, if you die while wearing it, it absorbs your guilt. That means you don't leave behind part of your mana bar upon death and do not need to go get it. I was very happy to find that out, and it lasted all of 5 minutes before I died another 2 times and the bead got too heavy with my sin. Cool. I think I got God in the same place all 3 times anyway. Why do I even mention this? Because apparently the bead fully corrupted with guilt looks just like those once worn by the confessor statues, hinting that they have secrets yet to be uncovered. First I gotta go get another holy wound of circumcision, or whatever it is up there. Past Viridiana is the titular lady of the Charred Visage, whose charred visage looks an awful lot like Mr. Boss from Smiling Friends. I just couldn't shake that image the whole time. I also think that she might have been meant to be fought before the Sorrowful Sisters, because this chick was pretty easy. Her projectile attacks were way easier to dodge in this space, even when things got a little crazy and she decided to use both hands. I had a breezier time with her than even Tenpai did, and I can only attribute so much of that to my skill growing. There's an upper limit to how much new information I'm able to absorb and apply to any given problem, and that upper limit is maxed out at 3 new things. So I can't have gotten that much better. We know the drill by now. The next freaky floating face grants us the holy wound of compunction, and with it, we can now access the great church around the roots of the world. To get there, we climb back down and head eastward, through the wasteland and to the bridge of the 3 cavalries. But before we can use our pain-shaped keys, that guy who's been following us finally makes himself known. He once again makes a promise to his sister that he'll be the one to put a stop to us, in her name and in the name of their captain. With that, we're thrust into battle with Esdras of the Anointed Legion. Oh, this boss fight was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's the most fun I've had with the combat thus far. You have to be so precise with how you move, making sure to attack only when it's safest, and quickly reading when that is. He hits like a truck, and has a massive hitbox when he swings that liturgical hammer. So I felt like my damage output and sustained livability was pretty well earned. And that felt good. And then, it's hard for me to express this part because it's purely a feeling thing, but maybe if the devs leaned harder into the hack and slash influence, this would be fucking exhilarating. I mean, look at the footage here. It's a very simple dance of a basic combo then movement. The two don't really mix. So I'm trying to imagine a system where the time between dodges and attacks isn't so long, where your movement and attack options flow together to keep combos going longer and longer against the enemy's offense. Maybe I'm asking for too much. And maybe if I hadn't, by this point, developed an instinctive reluctance to parrying, I would have gotten more out of the combat part. But honestly, this fight just serves to crystallize the general issue I have into one example. And obviously the game doesn't have to cater to my particular tastes. I'm only saying a version of this where the line between movement and fighting isn't so sharp would be more fun, in my useless opinion. Anyways, even after summoning the apparent spirit of his sister to aid him in the fight, Estorus can't stop the penitent one for being so penitent it kills him. He begs his sister for forgiveness, being unable to stop us on our quest, though the two shall now be reunited. I still don't know who that guy was. After defeating Estorus, we make our way to the door at the end of the bridge, now opened by the 3 holy wounds rattling around our pockets. We then get another insert from our main antagonist. These have been popping up very sporadically at pivotal moments in our journey, and serve to trickle out the backstory behind this monstrous pope. This is His Holiness Escobar, and he is ultimately what stands between us and the cradle of affliction. We'll dive into Escobar a little later. For now, we approach the ornate halls built in reverence to the miracle, past a few screens that serve as the front steps to a Vatican that, even with a supernatural curse, probably hosts less freaky shit than the real one. The entrance to the Mother of Mothers is the consecrated halls of the Knot of Three Words, where the narrating Dio Gracias stands to offer some exposition. You see, the image of the guy who's become a pole that's plastered all over the place is that of the Father, the Twisted One, the first son of the miracle. He was at first nothing special, just a simple young man who prayed for pain to ease his boiling contrition. His prayers were answered, and the miracle manifested itself for the first time by wrapping the guy's limbs around the log he sat upon. Years later, this tree that bleeds gold grew where he once stood, and its 3 roots are believed to represent the only words whispered by the Twisted One after his terrible transformation. My great guilt. He felt really bad about torrenting that copy of Paul Blart, a movie I have only seen while stuck in the children's wing of the psych ward. The other adult units were at full capacity, apparently. They made us sit in little red plastic chairs, meet a bunch of recovering heroin addicts, while we watched whatever DVDs got left behind to ease the suicidal babies. Except for at 8 o'clock, where we turn on Family Feud and all play together like the world's most dysfunctional nursing home. That's got fuck all to do with Blasphemous, but I typed a Paul Blart joke, and I don't know where else I'm supposed to fit that story. From here, the Mother of Mothers of the churches leads to a few unique areas that you're pretty much just set loose to explore. The game gets very non-linear after this. It wasn't holding your hand before, but now you don't even get a concrete objective once you pass through the Ferris tree and into the church itself. Figure it out, idiot! Before we explore the ornate halls of this continental cathedral, I head downstairs, finding the library of negated words and the countless souls sweeping through it. This gargantuan crypt of forgotten knowledge hosts towers of books, endless wooden cages keeping locked away sickly combinations of words that only the damned may read. Connected to the library is the sleeping canvases. This marble dungeon has been lined with portraits stained with age, whose oils have long since become faded imagery against the skin of these murals. But even the marble itself seeks to hurt you, taking the form of statues sculpted forever in penance, living out a burdenless agony as scraping stone automatons of the miracle's mercurial designs. Viridiana is down here, which means despite having the 3 holy wounds, there are apparently more bosses to fight. The first of the new batch hiding past those painful paintings is Exposito, Scion of Abjuration. He's a giant baby with a gnarly one-hit KO, but the devs didn't have you commit to infanticide, so the real trouble came from Exposito's bone snake pal. It's got a scorpion tail on one end and some dude's face at the other, a face that has no qualms about hawking heated loogies at you. But getting in position to smack the thing's weak spot puts you out of the way of those fireballs anyway, so I didn't have too tough a time beating up this overdeveloped fetus. It's a coin toss whether I'd win a fight against a baby in the real world. Those bitches are crafty. After beating Exposito, an elevator takes us back up to the library, where a petrified deacon is turned to dust, leaving behind the embossed mask of Crescente. That was apparently noticed by Escobar, who once again returns to remind everyone he's still here, and that he can see everything since he became a tree. What? Alright, so in the land of Custodia, all the great or withered houses of worship were built around a rich faith as vast and deep as those churches themselves. Belief became central to the lives of all those across the land. Fused to the bones of these people's worldview was religious fear and reverence towards the ungodly miracle. At the top of the ecclesiastical hierarchy was His Holiness Escobar. It's not known why exactly, but during his tenure as papal of the faith, Escobar came to believe his God had forsaken him and his people. Feeling existentially abandoned, Escobar turned his throne away from his flock, intent on forever separating himself and his holiness from the lives of those lamentful sinners in desperate need of guidance. But the miracle had plans for Escobar, no matter which way he was looking. As he sat, renouncing his duties, his holiness found his veins splayed out and rooted to the ground beneath him. Through those arterial passageways now flowed sap rather than warm human blood, and his skin aged and hardened into a reddish bark. Escobar had been slowly transformed into a mountainous tree whose trunk covered zip codes and towered over every structure in Custodia. Yet the miracle was far from done with Escobar's punishment. In my exploration, I made it to Mourning and Havoc, the worst area of the game. Now, this space was added in a DLC update and is completely optional, only serving to get you the true ending. But I did not know that, since it seemed so far that all areas were created equally. I also couldn't even get that ending anymore, since I skipped out on some earlier stuff. So I just hurt myself for no reason, basically. But why was this place so painful? Well, firstly, it exemplifies a lot of the small problems I have with the design, and they all add up to create a frustrating experience. One such issue is still that distinction between movement and combat. I use a couple of examples. Take this enemy here tossing anchors at me. I have no offensive options while climbing the ladder, and climbing takes fucking forever. Plenty of time for the guy to reload another anchor before lobbing it at me with accuracy someone wearing that stupid helmet, frankly, should not have. Then there's this witch who shoots very painful orbs of black magic, but they put her always in like the middle of a small floor. The momentum from my dash doesn't carry over ledges, and there are sometimes hazards around to further limit my movement, making this test just cramped and aggravating rather than invigorating. Then there's the waiting. My god, the waiting. You have to wait on an enemy to be open to attack for a very brief window before repeating the cycle over again. Did you get hit while waiting? Well, then your punishment will be more waiting as you agonizingly platform back up to where you were for another shot at wasting your time. And finally, I gotta be honest, I just don't think this place is well designed. I believe at this point I had maybe 2 mea culpa shrines left, so I wasn't fully upgraded. But even still, these enemies just absorb my sword swings, making their defeat tedious. Just more goddamn waiting. Upon finding out that Mourning and Havoc was completely optional, I said fuck that and continued exploring the Mother of Mothers. As I did so, I unlocked nifty shortcuts to make navigating this place more efficient. I'm really loving the world design in that sense. This is a Metroidvania with very streamlined progression and minimal unnecessary backtracking. My prayers were answered. That's probably also a Dark Souls thing, but wherever that kind of innovative map design originated, it's put to great effect in Custodia. This is a place that feels good to explore and run through, especially when you can see progress physically reflected like this in the world itself. The boss we find presiding over his dead congregation is Melquiades, the exhumed archbishop. Based off of the remains of early Christians found buried in Roman catacombs, Melquiades, like those first martyrs, was dressed in golden robes and Baroque jewelry to consecrate his faithfulness in gold. These arms really want you to think that this guy can move on his own, but they're not fooling me. I know without muscles or tendons, all he can do is shoot lightning at me. It's probably more effective than throwing hands, actually. Cutting down those fellas' arms will drop Melquiades to sword strike level. His offense isn't overwhelming, and those 4 arms are fairly easy targets, so it isn't long before the Archbishop is painfully reminded that to dust he must return. Inside Melquiades' chamber is another musty corpse, who blows away once I sneeze and drops the deformed mask of Orestes. That's another mass down, but there's still plenty of map to explore, and a long way to go before Custodia is free of the miracle's whims of cruelty. I hate to tell the penitent one this, but freeing y'all up to the whims of chance ain't much better in the long run. Ah hell, he can't hear me. With no other option left than to clamber northwards, Penitente over here makes it to the Archcathedral rooftops with gorgeous backdrops that show the fossilized culture of religious reverence that was Custodia. These screens host some of the toughest enemies yet, and you'll be locked into certain combat challenges the more you progress. I loved fighting other Knights of the Anointed Legion, a couple Esdras-style mini-bosses. And a little peek behind the curtain here, I came here a couple hours ago and found myself getting skewered. What was frustrating then became a real rush now, as my offense had gotten some buffs, so my skill had been naturally honed. I used to really eat these fireballs. With the strength of character development, if you consider your skill at video games to be indicative of character in any way, I finally reached a save point and a shortcut up here. There's also an elevator that requires those masks the Catholic mummies dropped earlier to be raised towards progression. That statue's got 3 faces, and I've only fought 2 bosses though, so I continue my trek as high as my mask limit will take me. The real view is definitely up here, as the penitent one is displayed in silhouette against another landscape of ruined chapels and the great tree that symbolizes His Holiness's final communion with the miracle. So, before we get to this final new area, I figured it best to fill out the tale of the Turned Throne. Now part oak, Escobar did not remain person-sized for very long. The miracle expanded his form to a gargantuan size, shaping his body into that towering tree that is forced to forever glimpse every sin in Custodia. What's more, this cruel and fickle god lit him on fire, and no earthly rainstorm could quell the roaring flames. The ashes of Escobar's perpetually immolated body of bark clings to the holiest halls in the Mother of Mothers. Once the flames ceased, they left behind a mountain of such ash, where, at the top, sits the turned throne before the most revered of the church's relics, the Cradle of Affliction. Many were driven to climb the mountain, but the ash swallowed them all. They returned to the world mutilated by the miracle, transformed into apostles of an otherworldly faith. Amongst them was Escobar himself, no longer human, but reborn as the last son of the miracle. There he remains, cursed to guard the Cradle of Affliction, the only thing capable of ending the cycle of torment and penance inflicted on the world. You know, it would have been cool if Dio Gracias conveyed that at all. More like Dio No Gracias. That's been brewing in me for a long time. Thank you for letting me get that out. You gotta beat up 2 more wardens, but not of our old frat house. These guys guard the Wall of Holy Prohibitions, the tower dungeon of sinners whose sin was not punishable by God, so the church just figured they'd do it themselves. It's not super long, and it's mostly made up of locked rooms you gradually find keys for. Beware the screaming lunatics. Oh, it's like coming home again. But while cleaning this place out, you get ambushed by a flaming sword. Somebody threw it, though. I don't think it's sentient. The floor crumbles beneath us, and we fall into an arena prowled by Kirte, whose name tag says he was returned by flames. Now this was a boss fight I really enjoyed. Look at this, guys. A bunch of movement challenges. I like the cut of this guy's jib. And this design makes the most of that distinction between movement and combat. Both were pretty fun taken on their own, and they're paced out well to make a satisfying combo when played in full. I just felt like I had a chance to really express myself through the combat in the time I was given, stringing full combos or throwing out a prayer to maximize my damage output. And I can only do that if I'd successfully outmaneuver the various attacks thrown my way. The distinction is still there, but I think they're complementing each other in this case. After beating up my new favorite boss, Dio Gracias waits outside to reveal Kirte's backstory. Wrongly branded a heretic by the church, Kirte was burned to death at the stake, his cries and prayers swallowed by the flames. Yet, as Dio Gracias puts it, fiery are the paths of the miracle. For this will beyond our understanding saw fit to give Kirte new life, reborn in burning penance. Continuing on with our quest, inside that room where we met Kirte's sword is the key to the high peaks. That grants us access to a lift all the way up to the top of the map as you enter the highest unexplored corner of Her Lady's Convent. The final mask is up here, meaning our rooftop trek is about to come to an end. This prompts another comment from Escobar as he proclaims he has now fully awoken at the whim of the miracle. See you soon, pal. But His Holiness's front steps are guarded by this lady. Chrysanta of the Rapt Agony is quite integral to the lore and the narrative here. It did not come across that way, aside from the fact she was kicking my ass, so I figured she must be somebody important. Long story short, in the prequel comic, you find out she was responsible for killing the penitent one the first time. Chrysanta's narration in the book tells us her penance is complementary to ours. Our God-given mission is to cease the cycle of pain inflicted by the miracle, and Chrysanta stands to prevent us from doing so, at any cost. She becomes a more prominent character if you're going for the true ending, but we'll discuss some of that towards the finale, when I get the semi-true ending. It's the same as the other one, except the penitent one lies about his height on his driver's license. Anyways, this person who stands in cosmic opposition to us is doing a pretty good job at it. Let me level with everybody here. I did not think to parry her. This is apparently a key component to making your offense worthwhile here. As such, I don't really know how this was supposed to go. I still managed to beat her, relying solely on dashes and movement to save me from that bandaged sword. But you're clearly not meant to do only that. So you can turn around during a dodge to swipe at you, telling you in neon signage to, for the love of God, hit the right bumper. My excuse is that the parry felt like it would be too slow to effectively counter Chrysanta. But none of our feelings have ever mattered, and my problem-solving skills equate to repeatedly shoving the square peg into the round hole. So I don't feel like any of my complaints were justified. Even still, there was fun to be had learning her moveset and figuring out the rhythm to attacking her. It was kinda close, but I turned out to be better at penance than she is, and Chrysanta falls to her knees in defeat. Yet we don't kill her, despite her encouragement. Perhaps it is not the miracle's will for us to do so. We've also taken a vow of silence in our penance, meaning this awkward silencio was all part of God's plan. We truly will never understand the whims of the miracle. Well, another peek behind the curtain, guys. I got my ass kicked by His Holiness. Multiple times! I figured that meant it was time for some cleanup, going about and getting some upgrades I missed on the main quest. The heftier upgrades, like relics that change the way you interact with the world, are given to you through one of the many side characters. This is another thing I wanted to praise about Blasphemous. It has so many tragic B-plots sprinkled throughout Custodia. This is where that Dark Souls delivery shines, as item descriptions flesh out the stories of these fellow penitents. But, just out of curiosity, I did want to imagine a more avant-garde version of this delivery. The art direction speaks for itself. If it sounds like I haven't been praising it, it's because I'd have to do so at every turn. As such, there's a part of me that would love if this story was told almost exclusively through that. Now, this is a purely personal thing, and I know this story means a lot to the people who dug into it. I'm just saying, a wordless approach with visuals this strong would hit deep for me. It'd be a thing where the connection between me and the game is based solely on the feelings it's evoking in me through the unique and moving pixel paintings. And that'd be a pretty powerful experience. That connection is there to a certain degree, but I kinda wish the devs took an all-or-nothing approach to delivering the story. Give us the text before boss encounters and literally nothing more. If they had just set up our main goal and characterized the world through the visuals, I would have been more satisfied. Because as it stands now, having like a halfway traditional narrative only gives me some of the feeling that could have registered much harder had the devs just told the story entirely through the art direction. Buy the art book, there's enough details in there to justify this claim. One of the side plots plays out purely in gameplay, however. Remember that bead we tainted by feeling guilty every time we died? The item description mentions the Confessor statues once wore them, and breaking one of those kneeling stone idiots reveals a small glimmering portal. Wearing that bead weighted with guilt will let you use the portal to access a combat challenge. These Confessor dungeons aren't much to write home about, honestly. I mean, they were decent. I enjoyed these single room encounters. The enemies remain pretty easy to deal with one at a time, though. And it will forever be satisfying to read their animations and parry their attacks successfully. A basic feat I rarely accomplish. I can do it here. Every time you complete a dungeon, that thorn Dio Gracias gave you grows. It eventually becomes the Custodia of Sin, a blood-red briar that now wraps around the handle of your sword. Just a heads up, you're going to want to have this prickly thing if you're going for a particular ending. I had done as much cleanup as I felt like doing, and so prayed the penitent one had enough shit in his pocket to get me through this time. Finding the sword lady to give me more health also helped. Regardless, I run into Viridiana one last time at the deambulatory of His Holiness. She tells us our quest is nearing its close, as the great and delirious guardian of the miracle lies atop these steps. She also tells us that she's been barred from approaching Escobar's domain, but her words can still come with us. Viridiana gives us a final prayer before disappearing from our narrative. The marble halls near Escobar's throne are laced with gold and ash. We make our approach, and His Holiness introduces himself. This was an incredible scene, frankly. The elevated prose is making this a grandiose moment, even if at the time I had no idea who this guy was. At last revealing himself, Escobar appears before the penitent one, telling us, "I curse you forever in name, I bless you forever in death." The full scene is just really chilling. It sets the stage wonderfully. This form of Escobar can lay some pretty suppressive fire, throwing lots of elemental projectiles your way while he's encased in a shield. His health bar gets depleted very rapidly though, shattering this illusory form and revealing to us the true last son of the miracle. The ashen clouds blanket a transformation into Escobar's true form. A giant tree. I'm supposed to be scared of that? He's stuck there. This is another boss that leaned a little more into the movement challenge side of things. If you gotta time your ascent up these disappearing platforms to land any hits on Escobar, and even then only after you beat up this sword enough times. I think this one is sentient. Any of the blows hit like a truck, but I had a time of it avoiding them while making room for my continued offense. But you want to know what really helped? Viridiana's prayer summons these two spinning plates that do touch damage and absorb projectiles. One could see how useful that is when the forever stationary Escobar can only throw orbs at you to defend himself. The best part? Clashing with Escobar's floating sword refills your mana bar, usually just enough for my girl's prayer to get heard. Disregarding that though, this was an enjoyable final boss. I felt like I was really put to the test on those two distinct fronts of movement and combat. Fittingly enough, it was Viridiana's faithful circles that laid the final hits on the last son of the miracle. Escobar disappears and will return to the world of form, where there's now nothing between us and that ashen mountain, atop which sits the Cradle of Affliction. Dio Gracias is here, and tells us the cradle is the grail of blood and gold that emanated from the forehead of the Father as he silently lamented the moment of his blessed twisting. Is he scratching his fucking nuts while he's telling me this? The Custodia of Sin pricks us deep, and it deems us worthy enough to climb the mountain of ash. The penitent one sits upon the turned throne and plunges the mea culpa into his chest. In a tragic reflection of our opening, blood coats our sword of guilt once more, and the penitent one must partake in unspeakable agony as recompense for the sins of the world. He does not scream, and his visage displays only complacent stillness as the miracle unfolds on him pain beyond reflection. When the transformation is over, it's revealed our final penance ended with our two becoming a tree. I shouldn't have made fun of the other guy. But, in our sacrifice, we break the cycle of penance under which the world was turning, freeing Custodia from the cruel influence of the miracle. Our twisted form is revered amongst our people, and Dio Gracias reveals that we've become the new Father, the true last son of the miracle. And forever shall we be rooted to the world of the living, worshipped for the suffering God has deemed we must endure forever and ever. Amen. Blasphemous is a killer work of art. It pulls from a rich culture to create a unique look, and one where every detail has been rendered to elevate your emotional experience with the piece. I only advocate for more minimalistic narrative because this artistry is wicked and sings all on its own. Frankly, if the gameplay of Blasphemous sucked ass, I might still tell you to play it on the graphics alone. Luckily, the gameplay is far from bad. This is an enjoyable Metroidvania. I just wish certain design decisions lean more into their particular influences. Then what's satisfying here could be something adrenal in another world. I felt the core gameplay loop be just on the cusp of exhilarating, but never quite going beyond being an engaging time. Which is a feat, don't get me wrong. I don't want to diminish when designers build something as strong as this. These are merely thoughts. The only other thing I want to mention is the true ending that was added in the Wounds of Eventide DLC. You're clearly not meant to get this on your first playthrough because it requires going out of your way to find certain items in a particular order. It also forces you to fight the toughest bosses in the game, and it mandates a trip through Mourning and Havoc. No, thank you. It ends with you and Chrysantha basically killing the gods who have been using the miracle to torment Custodia. Obviously, I don't have the satisfaction of getting it, but just having watched the cutscenes, I don't know, I kind of liked when the miracle remained totally off screen. Then I could really keep my conception of a god that laughs at our pointless suffering. And finding art that reflects that worldview is increasingly hard these days. For whatever it's worth, if I were to come up with 10 of the best Metroidvanias ever made, this would certainly be on there. In fact, I think if I played this when it came out, I wouldn't be able to put it down. The themes of penance and pain being inflicted upon the guilty would have rung really profoundly to me back then, and I guarantee you I would have gotten every upgrade and turned every story corner there was in this thing. Even as an elderly man now, for I age logarithmically, the visuals still sunk their teeth into me. I may not obsess over them, but they did lead to the game taking up brain space even when I put the controller down. Plus, there's a satisfying experience beating beneath this ungodly good artwork, meaning there should be nothing stopping you from pining for penance in the world of Blasphemous. Play this for yourself, and you never know. What missed my emotional center may be the thing that pierces yours. It's worth playing to find out. Well, that's another thing I bought during a Steam sale checked off the list. These are actually pretty fun. I didn't know they made fun video games. I thought they were supposed to mindlessly hurt you while providing meager comforts as the most dreadful agony is saved for the very end. Oh, my bad. That's just life.